Religions and consequently faith are things that have existed for thousands of years. However, despite the existence and belief in Jesus Christ in some religions, there are also people who stand against it and prefer not to believe in faith. Some curious cases throughout history show us certain individuals who were supposedly punished for controversial statements that even mock the existence of God, also called blasphemy. That is exactly what we are going to see here today. The comedian Heather McDonald experienced a big scare during a performance in the city of Tempe, in the state of Arizona, in the United States, when she fainted at the beginning of her stand-up comedy show. Through videos and eyewitness accounts, we can see that shortly before collapsing, the comedian was talking first about the coronavirus vaccine and then about how much God loved her, but of course, in an ironic and visibly mocking way. Right after she finished talking about God, she got dizzy and hit the floor really hard. She ended up suffering a skull fracture, but she was fine in the end.
I go twice, did shows, meet and greets, never got COVID. Clearly, Jesus loves me the most.
According to reports, many thought the collapse was part of the show. Doctors who were in the audience offered first aid as soon as it became clear that the fainting was no joke. The comedian was taken to the hospital by her sister-in-law, who was in the audience, where she underwent several exams, including a CT scan, and remained hospitalized for a few days. Thomas Andrews, the naval engineer responsible for building the Titanic, is frequently associated with the famous phrase, "Not even God can sink this ship." However, there is controversy surrounding this statement, as many believe that it was indeed the engineer who said it, while others claim it was the ship's captain, Edward Smith, who said it when asked about the vessel's supposed vulnerability to iceberg. Well, regardless of who actually said it, we know that in the end, the ship struck an iceberg and did indeed sink, taking many lives and going down in history. The Titanic's famous phrase represents humanity's arrogance in believing in the invulnerability of its creation. The ship was conceived and built during a period of major technological advances, when society saw itself at the height of its achievements. The confidence placed in the Titanic was so immense that people believed it was impossible for something so grand and modern to be destroyed. On the 4th of March in 1966, John Lennon got involved in one of the biggest controversies of his career. During an interview with the British newspaper Evening Standard, the musician claimed that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ. The statement did not cause controversy when it was originally published in the United Kingdom. However, months later, when it was republished in a teen magazine in the United States, there were angry reactions from Christian communities. Following the statement, some radio stations in the United States stopped playing Beatles music. In addition, their records were burned in public. The controversy coincided with the group's tour in the country in August of 1966. Lennon and the band's manager, Brian Epstein, tried to minimize the crisis by giving a series of press conferences. Some of them had to be canceled after the musicians received threats. 14 years after his controversial statement, John Lennon ended up losing his life when he was assassinated by a man who claimed to be his fan right at the door of his residence. The man drew a gun and fired 5 times at the musician. Many attributed his death and tragic end to his statement made 16 years earlier.
Teenagers have said, have repeated your statements that the Beatles, I like the Beatles more than Jesus Christ. What do you think about that?
Well, originally I was pointed out that fact in reference to England, that we meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion.
John's statement was so negatively received that even the Vatican issued a note condemning Lennon's comments. Soon after the controversy, Lennon tried to apologize numerous times in a few interviews, claiming he had been misunderstood. Marilyn Monroe was, and still is, one of the greatest icons in history. Marilyn's birth certificate revealed her name as Norma Jean Mortensen, but her baptism certificate shows a different name, Norma Jean Baker. She only legally changed her name to Marilyn Monroe in 1956, when she was already famous. Throughout the 1950s, she rose to prominence as a sex symbol, for example, being the first cover girl of the men's magazine Playboy in 1953. With a life marked by fame and excesses, many of Marilyn's close friends claim that she often opposed the church and the figure of Jesus. One of these individuals, the famous evangelist pastor Billy Graham, says he visited the actress one day and talked to her about God, attempting to bring him into her life, but she simply turned around and said, "I do not need your God." A few days after that meeting, Marilyn was found lifeless in her home from an overdose. With a glamorous life marked by numerous controversies, including a supposed relationship with the then President of the United States, John Kennedy, Marilyn began to take a lot of antidepressants and use drugs, which eventually led to her death. In 2015, during her performance at the Brit Awards 2015 held in London, the so-called Queen of Pop Madonna put on a show where her dancers were dressed as demons. Everything seemed fine until, at a certain point in the show, she stopped right at the top of the stage steps with her back to the audience and completely wiped out on the floor. She paused for a few seconds, but soon got up and kept on singing. It did not take long for the moment to go viral and for people to associate her fall with a divine punishment, since she was singing on a stage where her dancers were dressed as demons. The fall happened because of an error by the singer herself, who should have untied the cape she was wearing in time for the dancer to pull it off. She got tangled up, failed to untie it, and when the dancer pulled the cape, she went with it. There's a story going around about eggs in the trunk. This narrative has been around for quite a while and intrigues a lot of people regarding an alleged accident and divine miracle that occurred in the city of Campinas in the year 2005 in Brazil. It all begins with Annalisa, a rebellious young woman who dove headlong into nightlife, leaving her school and family commitments behind. She went clubbing, wore flashy outfits, and got involved with drugs. Her mother, worried, had her admitted to a rehabilitation clinic. However, after being released, Annalisa returned to her old life. One evening, she took her mother's car to go out with friends, and when they went to pick up one last friend at her house, the mother came out as well, and noticing the friends were drunk, told them to go with God. Mockingly, they replied that only if he would go in the trunk because the car was full. Later that night, sad news arrived that the vehicle had crashed and everyone had passed away. The wreckage was unrecognizable, except for the trunk, which remained intact. Inside it, the mother found a carton of eggs from her last shopping trip. Surprisingly, the eggs were unharmed. Some say it was an act of God, while others argue that the story is false. Two fighters were set to face off, and shortly before their match, they were invited by a TV station to give an interview face-to-face. It was like a debate. At that moment, one of the fighters brought up the fact that his opponent had made some controversial statements, showing he did not believe in God and saying so in a mocking way. The Christian fighter became very irritated and declared he would win the fight together with God. The opponent then taunted him, saying he would defeat both. In the end, he ended up getting knocked out, and the Christian fighter left victorious.
Believe in all that stuff at
Well,
all.
I do.
Because Jesus Christ is my Savior, and I don't believe in all spirits and alter egos.
Of course, the outcome sparked huge controversy, with the defeated fighter being accused of blasphemy. Furthermore, many Christians around the world claimed his defeat was God's punishment for his words. In 2019, the samba school Gaviões da Fiel presented a controversial parade during Carnival in Brazil, portraying a confrontation between Jesus Christ and the devil. In the opening section, a performer dressed as Jesus was dragged, pushed, and trampled by another performer dressed as the devil. This presentation sparked debates and controversy about freedom of expression, religious intolerance, and respect for sacred symbols. The World Christian League, a Catholic organization, filed a lawsuit accusing Gaviões of blasphemy and of desecrating the image of Jesus. 4 years after the event, a catastrophe caused by heavy rains hit the entire coastline of Sao Paulo in Brazil, claiming numerous lives. It did not take long for religious people to begin attributing that tragedy to the punishment for the parade by the samba school from Sao Paulo 4 years earlier. At the time, heavy rains impacted the coastal region of Sao Paulo, causing floods, landslides, and collapses. The populations of several cities were left homeless, and a state of emergency was declared. Even the president visited the affected cities. Cazuza was and still is a huge icon of Brazilian music who, sadly, left us too soon in 1990. Despite all his talent, the singer always led a very controversial life, often appearing drunk and under the influence of drugs, and he never seemed to have a problem exposing himself. Cazuza also always made it clear he was outraged by the church, mainly because he disagreed with some of its stances. Very sarcastic during a show he performed at a venue known as Canacau in Rio de Janeiro. In Brazil, the singer was smoking cannabis. At a certain moment, he took a drag, blew the smoke into the air and said, "This one is for you, Jesus." That mocking and ironic moment got a lot of attention across the country. Not long after that controversial remark, Cazuza contracted the AIDS virus and passed away because of it. Many Christians who were totally against the singer's lifestyle and statements, such as the one just mentioned, quickly became convinced that the singer's illness and death were a punishment. During one of her performances, the singer Lady Gaga was supposedly yet another victim of divine punishment. In images captured by someone in the audience, we can see the singer on stage performing a song called Judas, which not only mocks Jesus, but also claims that Judas is the devil she clings to. Well, just as she was singing those lyrics, one of her dancers, while moving a stage prop, accidentally hit her right in the head. She cried out in pain, but the dancer did not even notice. Even though she was struck on the head, she carried on with the show. Apparently, it hurt quite a bit. Most likely, the singer should not have been standing in that spot when the dancer went to remove the prop, but for some reason she was there and got hit. According to reports, she had a minor cut on her head but was otherwise fine. Not even the president of a country can escape divine punishment, or so they say about Tancredo Neves. The then-elected president of the republic in the year 1985 in Brazil supposedly stated shortly before his inauguration that not even Jesus could take away his term. That remark started circulating, and shortly after, strange things began happening in Tancredo's life. One day before his inauguration, Tancredo fell ill and was hospitalized in serious condition, unable to attend the ceremony to finally take office as president. However, what theoretically should have been temporary got worse, and soon his condition deteriorated. A short time later, he passed away from an infectious disease. Even though he was elected president, Tancredo never assumed office. In his place, the elected vice president, José Sarney, took over, becoming the first civilian president after 21 years of military dictatorship. Bon Scott was a well-known singer for being one of the vocalists of the iconic rock band AC/DC. It was during his time as singer that the band released one of their most famous songs called Highway to Hell. According to reports, Bon helped compose the song and was very pleased with the release. However, shortly after the album containing that song was released, he was found lifeless inside a car. Of course, as always, many people who already disagreed with the band's style and the song's lyrics drew a connection between Bon's death and divine punishment, literally putting the singer on the highway to hell. The official cause of his death was declared as acute alcohol poisoning following a night of heavy drinking. According to reports, Bon choked on his own vomit. Still, the circumstances surrounding his death remain mysterious and controversial even to this day. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.